The azure pearl flew above her head and she struck it with a spell seal. It immediately shined with radiant light before releasing countless threads of azure light that swept past the green mist. With violent sweeps, the wind of light scattered the surrounding mist, leaving an area of 300 meters around her entirely clear. She spotted a youth standing 100 meters away, silently observing her without the slightest emotion. He was Hanli, who had been waiting quite a while for her. A cold glint appeared in the woman's eyes and her bright gaze flickered. Once her spiritual sense swept her surroundings, she frowned and glanced at the sky. About 100 meters above them, there was a cloud of silver and gold silently floating there. When she saw the true appearance of the golden cloud, her expression vastly changed, with the icy intent in her eyes only growing denser. The woman muttered, "Gold-devouring beetles. It turned out that you were the cultivator who possessed them." Hanli was surprised she had recognized them, but he managed to retain his calm. There seems to be many spell warriors amongst the Mulan that recognize these insects. I am truly surprised. Did the spell warrior who last saw me inform you? Rather than answer his question, she asked, "The Heavenly Wind Tribe's Sage Mu had his body destroyed by your hand." Betraying not the slight vigilance that grew in his heart, he flatly said, "Sage Mu? The spell warrior that pursued me with the wind-riding chariot? If that is the one, then yes, I am the one who destroyed his body. Were it not for his nascent soul fleeing so quickly, I would have been able to exterminate both spirit and body. Could it be you wish to take vengeance on his behalf?" Since this woman already knew of the celestial ice flames and the thunderstorm wings, he wouldn't be able to catch her off guard, turning her into a somewhat troublesome opponent. All of his battles at nascent soul stage so far, barring one, had been handled by first catching his opponents off guard with the thunderstorm wings and later using the celestial ice flames to freeze them through. Sage Mu's body didn't possess particularly deep cultivation, so its loss isn't anything to complain about. However, you possess many mystical abilities and are able to even control the gold-devouring beetles, therefore, you will not be escaping me alive. The green-clothed woman's expression sank and she quickly formed a hand incantation. With white light flashing around her, a white ribbon suddenly floated from her body as it fluttered with the wind. She then twirled her palm and a faint yellow cauldron appeared in her hand. It was refined from some unknown wood, was 4 inches large, and appeared rather antiquated, with cryptic talisman characters carved on its exterior. When Hanli's spiritual sense swept past it, his expression changed. Your gold-devouring beetles may be an exotic insect from antiquity and nurtured to a stage of invulnerability and ravenous gluttony, but it just so happens that it is capable of being restrained by wood attribute magic treasures, like my yellow spirit cauldron. In the past, I fought against a soaring tribe's cultivator who commanded gold-devouring beetles, and I sought this cauldron in preparation to deal with him when I met him again. But I didn't think that I'd first meet a heavenly south cultivator that used them rather than him. Were this not the case, I would have found such a large number of gold-devouring beetles difficult to deal with, regardless of how mature they were. Once the green-clothed woman finished speaking with a cold tone, she stroked the small cauldron with her delicate hand and caused it to magnificently shine with light. A translucent light barrier faintly appeared. When Hanli heard this, he curled his cheek and soon wore a grave expression. There are others that use gold-devouring beetles. You don't know of it. Gold-devouring beetles are the sacred insects of the soaring tribes, our arch-enemies. Their ancestors spent an immense amount of time before finally nurturing several tens of fully mature gold-devouring beetles. Only the most distinguished of their cultivators were allowed to inherit them. But ever since those times, an unknown number of spell warriors were devoured by them, becoming a target of hatred amongst the Mulan. Since you possess so many of them, I cannot allow you to pass them down, regardless of how mature they may be. With that said, she expressionlessly tossed the small cauldron above her. The small cauldron circled once above her and in a flash of light, it shot a pillar light directly towards the cloud of beetles in the sky. Hanli was dumbstruck to hear that there already existed fully mature gold-devouring beetles in this world, but when he heard her malicious tone, he regained his bearings and tossed the matter to the back of his mind. His heart sank upon seeing her use the cauldron to directly attack the beetles with wood spirit chi. With a fierce expression momentarily appearing on his face, he pointed to them and had the golden cloud disperse into countless golden petals. In the blink of an eye, the beetles could hardly be seen. As a result, the yellow light had missed its mark. The woman was stunned, but something soon came to mind and she swept her spiritual sense into the mist nearby. A short moment later, she frowned and an icy aura enveloped her face. You actually commanded the gold-devouring beetles to attack the other spell warriors. You believe that you can afford to be distracted. Before she even finished speaking, she had already flung her white ribbon towards Han Li. The ribbon shined with dazzling white light as it circled in the air before transforming into a snow-white hawk that spanned about 6 meters in length, with eyes of flame and jet-black claws. It flapped its wings and it instantly disappeared in a flash of white light, reappearing a moment later above Han Li's head. Then with a caw, it swooped down with its razor-sharp claws aiming at it. The huge hawk was extremely fast. In Han Li's alarm, he raised his hand out of instinct, shooting several 10 arcs of golden lightning from his palm, forming a large golden net to meet in the incoming hawk. When the white hawk saw this, its eyes ominously glinted and its wings trembled. The wind boomed. Countless blades of wind shot out in a dense barrage to meet the incoming net of golden lightning. Explosions sounded out as golden and white light intertwined. Upon contact, the golden net had blocked a majority of the blades of wind, but they were too strong. The net of lightning was cut through, and several tens of wind blades shot towards Han Li with the huge hawk closely following after them. Yi! Despite the astonishment betrayed from his eyes, the rest of his face remained expressionless. He flicked his fingers, releasing over 10 azure sword streaks to meet the blades of wind. Soon after, he flipped his palm and a small blue shield appeared in his hand. With a slight tremor, the blue shield grew several times larger, extending to 3 meters in length. Lustrous blue light fluidly wandered from its surface as if it were truly made of liquid, making for an exceptionally odd sight. At that moment, the azure sword streaks had shattered the blades of wind and were about to strike the hawk. The hawk showed no fear and flapped its wings, sweeping away the azure chi before continuing its sweep down towards the huge blue shield. Han Li coldly snorted and pointed to the shield, causing it to shine with greater magnificence. Consequently, the hawk's claws struck an icy surface, leaving only ripples behind. But in that instant of delay, an icy glint flashed from Han Li's eyes and he raised his hand. A black light suddenly emerged from his palm, transforming into a black-red hand that was 3 meters wide. It shot out at a speed greater than lightning and forcefully grabbed the huge hawk. Whoosh! Yin flames suddenly emerged from the hand and enveloped the hawk in pitch-black flames. The hawk attempted to escape its grasp as it miserably wailed and fiercely picked the hand. Han Li grew relieved at the sight of this and turned his head towards the woman. The woman didn't appear to mind that her hawk was captured. Instead, she was muttering an ancient incantation with a solemn expression. Upon closer inspection, Han Li wasn't able to understand it in the slightest, much to his shock. Soon after, the woman spread out her fingers in the style of a lotus flower and white light began to flicker, forming what seemed to be a white lotus. Although Han Li didn't know what she was planning, she was still a mid-nascent soul stage cultivator. Anything that took an incantation this long was certain to be powerful. He couldn't allow her to smoothly succeed. Once that was thought, Han Li flung out his sleeve with a grave expression, summoning several tens of azure flying swords in a swarm. They then condensed together into a mist and charged towards the green-clothed woman. Taking advantage of this delay, Han Li raised his other arm towards the huge hand that was tightly gripping the bird. The black-red hand suddenly gripped with further force and instantly dragged the bird before him. Without a thought, Han Li spat a sliver of blue icy flame onto the struggling bird. Crackling, the blue flame instantly covered the bird in a layer of sparkling frost. The resulting ice sculpture captured its desperate struggle in a lifelike image. A trace of satisfaction appeared on his face. But just when he thought to collect it, he heard a series of divine rings in front of him. Blinding white radiance suddenly erupted from the woman, covering the surrounding area of 300 meters under a layer of white light. Han Li inwardly cursed and hastily looked at the strange scene from across him. The green-clothed woman had finished her incantation, but now, the white lotus had left her hand and was floating 3 meters above her head. It continuously unfolded its petals as it shined with dazzling light. As for the cloud of sword chi that he unleashed, it was stopped about 40 meters away from her as it attempted its hardest to make its way towards her. It seemed to be blocked by something invisible. Han Li unconsciously narrowed his eyes. It appeared the white lotus wasn't something that was created from a treasure, but was rather something that was formed from the woman's own magic power. Han Li was truly amazed that something this powerful was solely produced by a technique. However, this amazement only lasted for only a moment. He took a deep breath with a sullen expression and quickly raised his arm, cover it in a layer of faint black chi. The black chi appeared alive as it continuously lashed around and grew thicker. By the time it became pitch black, Han Li's expression grew stern. His arm quickly swelled, becoming 3 times as thick in the blink of an eye. Soon, a layer of dazzling crimson light began to cover the black chi in an incredibly bizarre display. At that moment, Han Li glanced coldly at the green-robed woman, and just as it so happened, the woman also raised her head to look at him. Their eyes met. Then when her eye saw Han Li's monstrous arm, a cold glint shined from them. "Go!" Han Li roared and dropped his arm, releasing a semicircular mass of black-red light. Once it left his arm, it grew to the length of 10 meters. It ripped through space as remnants of light dragged behind it, instantly arriving before the White Lotus. The green-robed woman raised her brow at the sight of the Yin Devil execution and spat out a mist of lustrous white chi onto the lotus. In an instant, a huge lotus mirage suddenly emerged from the White Lotus, enveloping both itself and the woman. In a flash of light, the Yin Devil execution rammed into the lotus mirage and easily cleaved into it. But after traveling 10 meters deep into the mirage, it slowed down before coming to a stop. A trace of pride appeared on the woman's face, but soon, her expression vastly changed. At that moment, she saw Han Li fling a black object at her. As soon as it left his hand, it began to exponentially expand and overbearingly pound downwards on both woman and lotus. The thousand-fold mountain! When the woman saw this huge towering mountain, she couldn't help but shout its name. This ancient treasure was renowned amongst spell warriors. Even if a mid-nascent soul-stage spell warrior like her were to use a secret Buddhist technique from antiquity, they wouldn't be able to receive an attack from the mountain unscathed. The green-robed woman formed a hand incantation without a further thought, immersing the White Lotus above her, the small yellow cauldron, and herself in a fusion of white light. In an instant, the air surrounding the lotus became completely still before suddenly erupting with azure radiance. The woman came into view once more. Despite no longer being sustained by the woman's magic power, the lotus mirage grew dim and didn't immediately fade away. It managed to last for a short moment before being completely scattered by the descending mountain. Revealing not the slightest joy from his face, Han Li muttered, "Wind movement technique." He then began to inwardly curse. He didn't expect that this woman would be capable of a strange movement technique on par with his lightning movement. In this case, he wouldn't be able to harm her unless he somehow trapped her. He had managed to come up with a plan, but he felt unsure of it. She was as skilled with her wind movement technique as he was with his thunderstorm wings. So long as he managed to keep up with her, he was confident that he would be able to easily wound her with the fissureness of the celestial ice flames. With that thought, Han Li raised his hands and pointed to the black-red light and the tens of bamboo clouds warm swords that had finally escaped their restraints. Quickly, they fiercely shot towards where the green-robed woman had appeared. Thunder then roared from behind Han Li and silver wings appeared from his back. As for his blue light shield, he waved both his arms and it quickly shrunk before flying back into Han Li's sleeve. At that same moment, the huge black-red hand relaxed its grip on the white ribbon hawk, and it streaked towards the woman in a ball of black light. But that was not the end of his preparations. He raised his arms once more, but this time, a blue flame emerged from his palm. It crackled with a wavering blue brilliance. Finally, Han Li took it upon himself to personally close in on her, having done what he could to restrict her movements. In a flash of silver lightning, he disappeared, leaving only rolls of thunder in his wake. When the woman saw Han Li release so many treasures in a single display, she felt her head suddenly ache. She originally believed that this measly early nascent soul cultivator's power only extended to a few strange abilities. So long as these abilities were restrained, she should be able to smoothly deal with him. But she didn't expect that in a single move, he would unleash several powerful treasures in succession. In comparison, the only treasure she released had been restrained by her opponent. As someone who was used to being revered amongst the spell warriors, this embarrassment had given rise to fury. However, the woman clearly understood that since he possessed so many treasures, it would be difficult to injure him with ordinary techniques and treasures, let alone kill him. When she saw Han Li flap his wings and disappear in a flash of lightning, she snorted and eventually came to a decision to exhaust a bit of her strength and finish Han Li off with one of her killing moves. Of course, she couldn't allow Han Li to easily approach her during this time. As she pondered this, the White Lotus had dropped down onto her head and disappeared into her body. Just as this happened, Han Li's figure appeared about 10 meters away from the woman's body in a flash of lightning. With a blur of his body, he suddenly appeared 3 meters away from her and hastily extended his cackling blue palm against the yellow barrier that surrounded the woman's body. Han Li was confident that the wood attribute barrier placed by the cauldron would be broken by the celestial ice flames. And his attack smoothly succeeded. However, the woman remained still and showed no indication that she was going to use her wind evasion technique. An unease filled his heart as a shiver spread across his back. At that moment, the woman suddenly shined with a soft white radiance as lotus petal mirages blossomed from her body. And against expectation, the faint yellow light barrier that Han Li just struck had actually managed to withstand his attack. Just as the white light and the blue flames made contact, Han Li felt his entire arm tremble. In the instant that the white brilliance shined, the lotus petals began to sweep towards him. Although they appeared slow, he wasn't able to evade their attacks, and he could only helplessly stare as the petals struck his body. Astonished, Han Li was struck back, a wave of pain assailing his chest. He was launched 100 meters away before he managed to barely stop himself, his body swaying. He glanced at the woman with alarm as he held his hand against his chest. He glanced up and saw the green-robed woman was now standing above a lotus that spanned 10 meters wide. White lotus petals were slowly fluttering all around her, and the woman herself was coldly staring at Han Li. The treasures he had launched to attack her, they had been easily stopped by the petals surrounding her. They were far more powerful than the lotus mirage from before. At that moment, Han Li suddenly felt his throat become hot and he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. He wryly smiled in his mind. He had suffered quite a bit in that exchange. Han Li then spat out the turbulent qi in his body and slowly moved his palm away from his chest. He glanced down at his chest to see that his robes were already shattered, revealing a tri-colored luster that laid underneath. The battle armor had a huge dent in it with thumb-sized cracks on it. Han Li felt his breath turn cold, and the pain he felt from his chest became far sharper. With a gloomy face, he raised his head to look at the green-robed woman. As a result, he saw both astonishment and disappointment from her face when she laid her eyes on his armor. He coldly snorted and tore away at the remnants of his robe, revealing the beetle armor in its entirety. Then in an azure flash of light, he swept his hand across the armor and repaired it with an unbelievable speed to its original condition. Shock appeared for just a moment on the woman's face, but her cold demeanor was soon restored as her killing intent against Han Li only grew stronger. Without further thought, she placed her palm against her chest and began to utter a cryptic incantation. A ball of azure light then flew out of her sleeve and dropped into her hand. The light faded away to reveal an azure oil lamp of ancient and worn condition. It appeared even slightly blackened. The green-robed woman looked at the lamp with a faint reluctance to use it, but then she turned her eyes to fiercely glare at Han Li. This scene left Han Li with a slight sense of dread. He didn't know what kind of ancient treasure this bronze lamp was, and this was the first time he ever saw a treasure lamp. Various thoughts quickly passed by his mind before he decided to fly into the sky and recall his treasures. Then with a flap of his wings he disappeared. He reappeared in front of the frozen ribbon hawk, and bluntly took it into his hand before disappearing once more, reappearing on the border of the dense mist. The green-robed woman's mouth dropped in amazement. Ever since she ascended to her current cultivation, she encountered many fearsome opponents that had been her match, but this was the first time she saw a high-grade cultivator turn tail and run. But when she saw Han Li take her ribbon hawk with him, she awoke from her stupor with fury. Grasping onto the lamp, she glided through the air on the white lotus, closely following him in a breeze. Afterwards, she entered the dense fog and disappeared without a trace. Immediately afterwards, azure light flashed with each appearance of silver lightning, closely chasing after it. The sounds of thunder and wind intertwined. In an instant, Han Li lured the green-robed woman into an unfamiliar area of the formation. It was there that Han Li stopped and glanced at the frozen ribbon hawk in his hand. With a cold chuckle, golden lightning flashed from his hand and shattered it. The ice-clad ribbon hawk shattered into pieces alongside the ice. But when the green-robed woman saw this while she was pursuing him, she coldly laughed and stamped down on the white lotus below her, causing it to scatter away the nearby mist with a wild gale. Han Li narrowed his eyes, staring at her malicious expression. He calmly asked, "Is fellow Daoist not heartbroken that her treasure was destroyed? Or do you believe my actions weren't enough to destroy the treasure?" With that said, he casually glanced at the cleared air, not paying any attention to the shards of ice that were floating in the air. "How about you tell me?" The green-robed woman pointed at Han Li, insteadly causing the countless shards of ice at Han Li's side to shine with white light. Han Li was stunned and immediately raised his arm, unleashing an azure mist to engulf the glowing ice. But in that moment, the ice shattered and specks of white light escaped from them, each of them flocking towards the woman. The azure mist was too late. Seeing that his attack failed, his face grew sullen, but he stayed his hand rather than waste his effort on attacks that might have no effect. He saw that white light was condensing in front of her, soon reaching the size of a head-sized ball. With a spell seal striking the ball, a hawk's cry immediately sounded out from the ball in a blinding flash of white light before taking shape of the snow-white hawk from before. When Han Li saw this, he frowned, but soon he took note of how its spirit was listless compared to before. He revealed a pensive expression at the sight. It seemed shattering the treasure did have some effect. The hawk wasn't he truly immortal? He was sure that after killing the hawk several more times, it would definitely turn to ash and scatter. Despite seeing that the hawk had weakened, she wordlessly waved her arm and commanded it to take to the skies. It then twirled in the air before drifting back down as a white ribbon. Once it touched the woman's body, it disappeared. With one hand holding the lamp, she brushed her hair with the other. With a detached tone, she said, "Your sudden stop must have been to infuriate me by shattering my magic treasure. It seems that this place should be your contingency plan." Han Li grew silent for a moment before speaking with spirited eyes. "Since you already knew this and chased me, it seems you hold much confidence in the treasure in your hand. Perhaps you might tell me something of it. This is the first time I've ever seen a lantern-type ancient treasure." The woman's face grew sullen. She said without reservation, "No, rather how about I send you off to the underworld?" She then opened her mouth and spat a ball of nascent flame into the lantern. Specks of azure light then began to slowly rise up from it. Han Li sighed and he swept his arms, summoning a green formation flag and a red azure formation plate into his hands. He took a deep glance at the woman before tossing the small formation flag in the air. He quickly struck it with a small seal and hurriedly muttered an incantation. The formation flag flashed with light, instantly causing a green mist to suddenly form. It extended 100 meters around the sky and scattered with the wind before transforming into a 40-meter-long flood dragon of green mist. At that same time Han Li ordered the flood dragon to attack the woman. He had the formation plate in his hand shine with radiance. He tossed it underneath him and had it immediately transform into white mist as it disappeared further from sight. Suddenly, the seas of mist down below began to roil and release countless threads of red azure light that shot towards the green-robed woman in a dense barrage. He then took out a small silver bell with a wave of his sleeve. It wildly expanded in the blink of an eye and began to release silver sound waves with a loud ring. Then with all of that done, he streaked towards the green-robed woman's head. Since he wasn't able to grow close to the woman, he would make use of silver sound waves to attack. Perhaps a formless attack would have some effect. Of course, against the green-robed woman's white lotus flower and the unknown bronze lamp, Han Li's killing move wasn't any of the attacks he released. Rather, it was Silver Moon, who had burrowed herself earlier in the earth. At that moment, Silver Moon had already begun to unravel the purple cloud lace and was standing at the center of the formation. She was waiting for when the green-clothed woman would let down her guard so she could deliver the fatal blow. Although the green-clothed woman didn't know that there was someone lying in ambush, she turned a blind eye to the restrictions and attacks that Han Li unleashed. She only lowered her head to look at the lamp that was flickering with weak azure flames. A sneer appeared on her face. She unhurriedly raised her arm and nimbly took out a pea-sized flame from the lantern with two of her fingers. At that moment, the flood dragon of mist, the threads of azure red light, and the silver sound waves were all about to strike her. The woman didn't reveal any worry in the slightest and simply pointed to the white lotus down below her feet. White light flashed and it began to quickly revolve. Its petals contracted before instantly shrouding the woman in an impenetrable barrier. The flood dragon of mist was the first to strike the barrier. It opened its mouth and spouted out a surging breath of green mist. At that same moment, a white lotus petal from within the barrier lightly swept and scattered the attack. Then the red azure threads followed. They had also been scattered. Only the sound waves weren't blocked by the white lotus petals. They passed through the barrier, but it was unknown what effect they would have. When Han Li saw this, he formed an incantation gesture with his hands, and the red azure light threads ceased their attacks on the barrier. Instead, they formed a huge net and quickly layered upon themselves, blocking the white lotus from every side. As for the mist flood dragon, it surged and transformed into a large expanse of green mist, submerging the white lotus within it. As for the silver bell, it quickly arrived before the white lotus and was controlled with Han Li's full strength. The silver sound waves became stronger and continuously struck at the green-clothed woman through the barrier. For a time, the green-clothed woman from within the white lotus seemed to be restrained. However, Han Li didn't appear happy about this in the slightest. Rather, he furrowed his brow at the sight. As Han Li worried that the attacks actually made no difference, the contracted petals of the lotus immediately blossomed and spread out without the slightest warning. The petals were each razor sharp. The surrounding mist and threads of light were completely scattered as soon as the flower unfolded. Han Li appeared particularly grim at the sight. The beautiful, green-robed woman was standing at the center of the white lotus with an expressionless face. She held the bronze lamp in one hand and clasped a seemingly ordinary blue flame in the other. She glanced at Han Li and then looked above him at the silver bell that was enveloping the woman in silver sound waves. A harsh expression flickered from her eyes. She suddenly raised her hand and sent an ember of flame into the bronze lantern. It crackled and trembled before instantly disappearing from sight. In the next moment, the huge silver bell was struck by an azure fireball out of nowhere and was enveloped by it. When the woman saw this, she uttered an incantation and had the surface of the silver bell scorched by the unknown azure devil flame. The silver bell wailed for a moment and released silver light in an attempt to resist the flames. But after an instant, the silver bell was deformed by the silver flames and turned into molten silver. After that, the azure devil flame scattered without a trace. Han Li's face paled at the sight of the ancient treasure being scattered. At that moment, the green-clothed woman swept her hand and picked off another azure ember from the lamp with practiced ease, and malicious glanced at Han Li. Han Li inwardly cursed and flapped his thunderstorm wings without another thought. He then disappeared, leaving only thunder in his place. The woman didn't mind this in the slightest and dropped the azure ember into the lantern. Just as she was about to blow spiritual chi into it, purple light suddenly flashed beneath her and a 40-meter-wide purple net rushed towards her from below. As the green-clothed woman stood in place, she suddenly heard another woman's laughter before being instantly shrouded in a purple net. A beautiful woman suddenly emerged with a yellow flash of light soon after the purple net appeared. She chuckled and said, "Since you're fond of playing with fire, how about witnessing the might of my purple cloudlace jade sun flames?" She raised her hand. The purple net flickered with flame, covering it with a layer of azure white flame. There were even several azure white flame serpents that suddenly emerged from the net and fiercely attacked the white lotus. Soon, the white lotus was entirely engulfed in blue-white flame. At that moment, Han Li appeared about 40 meters away from the green-robed woman with a smile on his face. He flung out his sleeve and summoned his 72 bamboo cloud-swarm swords before him. Once they swarmed into the sky, he struck them with several spell seals in quick succession. The flying swords released a clear ring and condensed together into a 20-meter-long sword. Thunder roared from within it as dense arcs of lightning began to shoot off from the sword, transforming the sword into one of thunder and lightning. However, Han Li didn't stop there. He took a deep breath and he spat a thread of celestial ice flame onto the sword, adding a layer of faint blue flames onto the surface of the sword. Han Li pointed at the sword with an icy glint shining from his eyes. It trembled before cleaving directly towards the white lotus. At that moment, the green-clothed woman finally realized what had happened. In furious alarm, she flung the azure ember above her.